The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey everybody, thank you for taking some time to join us for this webinar today. Our presenter today is Rob Theriault. Rob is the Immersive Technology Lead at Georgian College. Rob's going to be talking about the future of immersive learning in EMS, basically picking up where our last webinar last week left off, talking about virtual reality and its applications in EMS education. Rob's going to go deeper into different applications of virtual reality and different ways that these can be utilized in the new way that classrooms are being defined. So without further ado, go ahead and take it away, Rob.
Great, thanks, Nate. Hi, everybody. So we got about 75 attendees so far, and we're anticipating about 190 or so. Anyone who tried to attend the last session that I did and wasn't able to, want to apologize to you. So we've increased the capacity to the system so more people can get on board, and we can get up to 500 people here now. So as Nate said, this is kind of a segue from the last presentation I did, where I sort of wrapped up talking about virtual reality. Just by way of background, for those of you who don't know me, I've been a paramedic for 35 years, retired from the road a year ago, and I've been teaching for about 20 years. And I've been an enthusiast for educational technology for a good many years, and have taught online synchronously and asynchronously. My last session was about emergency remote teaching, so I talked about some of the tools that I've used for emergency remote teaching. But a few years ago, I integrated virtual reality into our paramedic lab for patient simulation, for teaching empathy, and we started exploring virtual reality for online learning. And subsequent to that, I was invited to take a 2-year secondment as immersive technology lead. So that's what I'm doing now. And as fortune would have it, I'm not even teaching at the moment. So I'm really, in some ways, having the time of my life exploring virtual and augmented reality. So first, I want to say to those of you who are still providing care on the front lines, whether in paramedicine or nursing or some other field, that you have my deepest respect and my heartfelt wishes for a safe journey. You know, nothing I did as a paramedic really compares to the experience that frontline providers are going through now. So it's a really disturbing time. So let me just bring up the slides here. Might need help here, Nate, for the first
you just go
slide.
to the tab and hit play. It should show your screen.
Tab and hit play. I see screen. Oh, sorry, that's not what I wanted.
So if you just hit that play button that says show main screen, it should pop up to whatever's on your screen. Is that there for you?
I'm not, hang on a second here. Just going through the, I'm not seeing it on my panel.
There we go.
Okay.
There it is. Sorry about that.
That's the problem. So let me just bring that up. All right, Nate, are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. My apologies to everyone else for that minor glitch. I forgot this was a screen sharing thing. I don't know why, but I forgot this was a screen sharing thing. So let me just move to the next slide here. So just to give you some background in terms of my interest in virtual reality, a few years ago, I did a master's degree in educational technology, and I wrote some papers about virtual and augmented reality, and developed kind of an interest in where that was going, and wanted to explore what potential it might have in education. And I attended a NAEMSE conference in 2017 where I got to experience patient simulation and virtual reality for the first time. And that was my personal mind-blown experience that a lot of people describe when they try virtual reality for the first time. So in this VR experience, I was standing in front of a patient who was struggling to breathe. And the interesting thing about it in VR is that you're completely immersed in a different world, and you feel like you're in a different world, simultaneously understanding that you're really not in a different world. But I looked at this person who was in front of me and was sitting on the edge of his bed, and he was having some difficulty breathing. And when I spoke to him, he was able to speak, but in 4 to 5 word sentences. I could take a stethoscope and auscultate his chest. I could walk over to the night table and see his medications. If I recall correctly, I wasn't able to pick up his medications, but that would be an important feature in virtual reality. And at the end of the experience, what struck me were two things. Number one, I actually got a little twinge of adrenaline, the same way I might working in the field, where I thought, this guy is really sick and I need to assess and treat him quickly before he gets worse. The second thing that really struck me was that my first semester students, we do some discussion around patient assessment and treatment, and we do some case presentations, but the students really have no context. They have no idea what a person in respiratory distress looks like, or someone who's has multi-system trauma. We can show them images, but it's really not quite the same. And I thought virtual reality could be something that gives them some context, that helps them understand that, you know, what a person really looks like when they're leaning forward, struggling to breathe, when they're a little cyanosed, when you can see accessory muscle use and not just talk about it, when you can hear adventitious lung sounds. And I thought that could be really powerful. Now, I'm really lucky because I'll just say, okay, for some reason I'm getting muted and unmuted, but hopefully I'm unmuted now. You're able to hear me, Nate?
Yeah, I'm not sure what just cut out there. I didn't check,
Okay.
but
We're all good then. Yeah, so anyway, so I thought VR could be really powerful for not just first semester students, but second, third, and fourth semester students. We run, just for those of you who may not be familiar with the Canadian system, we have 3 paramedic levels. So if I don't say EMT, it's because we don't have EMTs in Canada. So we have primary care paramedic, which is a 2-year program, advanced care, which is a 3rd year, and critical care, which is a 4th year. And so I was really excited about virtual reality. I was excited about the way it made me feel, and the possibility for student learning that would go beyond the classroom. Let me just move to the next slide here. So let me just talk about some definitions very briefly. So XR, some people in the industry refer to X as extended reality, but I think a more appropriate description for X would be, you know, X in quotes, meaning X is the unknown, because the technology, both hardware and software, is evolving, and we're not entirely sure where it's going to go. So virtual reality, first of all, and I put an asterisk there because my talk's going to be focused on virtual reality because it's the most developed technology right now, is a technology where you wear a head-mounted display and the real world is completely occluded. You're completely immersed in a different world. Augmented reality at the other end is technology where you can use a tablet or a phone or augmented reality glasses, and you're seeing the real world with images superimposed on the real world. And virtual reality is like a toddler. It's about 4 years old right now in terms of good quality immersive virtual reality. It's about 50 years old in reality, but really good quality immersive virtual reality we've only seen in 4 years. And by comparison, augmented reality is like a fetus. It's really underdeveloped at this point, and there's not a lot available in terms of augmented reality glasses for consumers yet, apart from the HoloLens 1 and the HoloLens 2. And I've got a HoloLens 2 coming to my house this week, which I'm really excited about. But a couple of interesting things about augmented reality before I get into virtual reality. So augmented reality I've been racking my brains trying to figure the applications for augmented reality, and I think it would be helpful for things like, for example, anatomy, where you go into an anatomy lab and you're looking at organs and skeletal systems, and you can see the names of parts superimposed on that physical device or physical model, which would be great, but it wouldn't be enough. It has to be sort of like a cue cards on steroid, where it's showing you the names of parts and then it's testing you on it. That's really probably the best way to use augmented reality education, at least as I see it. The other thing that might be really exciting about augmented reality would be to have students wear AR glasses in a classroom and do case-based learning, where a group at one table could all see the same patient in AR, a patient who's ill or injured, see what they look like in that condition, and then be able to treat them. So it'd be really critical that there is some degree of interactivity where you can use your hands and touch things and do things like take vital signs or look at their ECG and so on and so forth. Mixed reality is somewhere in between, where there's interaction between digital objects and physical objects in the real world. And we're seeing some early signs of mixed reality. For example, there's a virtual reality program I'm familiar with where you are completely immersed in VR, and there's someone lying on the sidewalk who's collapsed, who's in cardiac arrest, and you can do chest compressions on that ghost animated character, if you will, on the sidewalk. Now in VR, you're purely just compressing the air, and it actually shows you your compression depth and rate, but you can take a mannequin and put it exactly in place of where that animated character would be, and you can do compressions and it'll give you the same feedback. So it's quite interesting. The other thing that's evolving right now is the hardware. So if you look at the top image on the right, that's actually a pair of virtual reality goggles by Vive, and there's a similar pair made by Panasonic. So the headsets are going to continue to get lighter, they're going to get faster. The glasses on the bottom are augmented reality glasses, and they're going to be some consumer grade AR glasses within the next year. They're going to look more like regular glasses. Now, the last thing I want to say about augmented reality that educators are completely unprepared for is by the year 2040, and that's not far away, that's only 20 years. And trust me, at my age, you realize time flies. So by 2040, and that's just a completely arbitrary number, augmented reality is going to be so ubiquitous that you will have no idea whether your student has access to augmented reality or not, because it'll look like glasses, it'll be in contact lenses. And so this is really going to challenge us, particularly in terms of testing students. So, as it stands right now, when students sit down for a test, I'll tell them, turn off your phones, put them away, put away your smartwatches. And in the future, I'll be saying, put away your phones, take off your smartwatches, take off your glasses, and close your eyes. Because there'll be no point in testing knowledge and comprehension once augmented reality becomes ubiquitous. We're really going to have to focus on higher order thinking when it comes to testing, because the students will have the information right at their fingertips, and they'll be able to do finger gestures with their augmented reality glasses on and look up information sort of on the fly. And one, will have no way of knowing whether they're wearing AR glasses or not. And two, a lot of them are going to have prescription AR glasses, so we can't really tell them to take them off. Let me go to the next slide here. Okay, so I won't go through a great amount of detail about pedagogy and so on, but because virtual reality and augmented reality is expensive and requires hardware and software, it's a little bit different from other educational technologies like podcasting and screencasting, which are cheap or free. So I think it's important for teachers, educators to think about VR in terms of its pedagogy. So for example, does it address the cognitive, affective, or psychomotor domains, or a combination of those things? I'm going to talk about the affective domain shortly, and there's really interesting applications for virtual reality in the affective domain. How is it in terms of cognitive load? What else was I going to say about pedagogy? I'll come back to pedagogy in a minute. So the software, we want to think about, is this a single player virtual reality experience or multiplayer? EMTs and paramedics don't work alone typically until they've had some years of experience. So they work in pairs or in teams. And so the software you're looking at for virtual reality should ideally be a multiplayer system. Hardware, hardwares are sort of broadly separated into two categories, either virtual reality headsets that require connection to a gaming computer, or virtual reality headsets that are standalone that don't require connection to a computer. And those ones are cheaper, the more portable, and so on. Virtual reality usually requires a certain amount of space, usually 10 by 10 or 12 by 12 foot space for moving around. The pricing is all over the map. And I found some great VR applications that are just completely cost prohibitive for our school, in the 30 to 60 grand per year range. And as beautiful as they are, we just can't afford them. So it would be really helpful if more and more educators started exploring virtual and augmented reality now, so we can all communicate the same messages to companies that we can't always afford the prices that you want to pay. And when it comes to return on investment, I'll give you an example. So a lot of virtual reality experiences that I've seen are great, but they may only address 1 or 2 learning objectives in 1 course out of 30 courses. And if they're asking for $9,000–10,000 a year for that, or $80 or $120 per student, that's just not going to work. Now, in Canada, the vast majority of colleges and universities are publicly funded, and we can't pay for a subscription model per student. 1, because of privacy laws, we can't give information about the students, and 2, we might start a class of 52, and 3 weeks later we're down to 44, and nobody's going to communicate with the company the names of the students who dropped out of the program. That's just not going to happen. So, and we can't incorporate it into tuition, and we can't attach a student fee to that, because it becomes a moving target, and there may be several VR applications we want to get. So lots of things to think about when it comes to virtual reality and augmented reality adoption. So as I said, I'm going to focus on VR, and the 3 areas that I think are fairly compelling with virtual reality are VR for online learning, a VR for teaching empathy, and VR for simulation. Those are the areas I've been exploring, not just with the paramedic program, but with nursing and the trades and fine arts and business and our biotech degree, a whole bunch of different programs. And I'll finish off talking about the metaverse. And Nate, if I forget, maybe you can remind me at the end to talk about the metaverse if I neglect to do so. So I'm leaving simulation for last, because that's probably the area most people are interested in, particularly given the situation currently with social distancing. And a lot of people are wondering, like, how do I get students to learn hands-on skills in the absence of being together? And virtual reality may provide some of the answer. So some terminology I want to talk about. We had some polling questions, and I neglected to post some of them. So maybe before we talk about presence, embodiment, and agency, I will just post the first question here. And hang on a sec. So just curious, how many of you are familiar with the holodeck from Star Trek? Okay, good. The numbers are going up. So we've got 114 attendees here today, which is great. It's a great number. And about 61% of people have voted so far. I think we're going to close it in a second because it doesn't look like we're going to get much above that. But so far, let's see. Okay, we'll close it there. And we'll share this information. So 75% are familiar with Holodeck, the 25% who aren't. So basically, the Holodeck would be analogous to a mixed reality experience where you go into a room and you feel like you're in a completely different world because there are holograms all around you. So it may be just a plain room with no furniture or anything in it, but everything is holographic. But not only is it holographic, but it has a tactile component to it where you can touch things and move things and do things in a holodeck. So we're not quite at the holodeck level yet, but I'm fairly confident we are going to get there in the next 30 years. So let me just close this out. All right. So let's talk about these three terms: presence, embodiment, and agency. So presence is the illusion of being somewhere while simultaneously knowing that you're not really there. And so when you're in virtual reality, even though the characters around you may look somewhat animated and the environment may look pixelated, you really do feel like you're there, like you're somewhere different. And you really get a sense of that when you take your headset off and you realize you're just in your boring office. But psychologists like to test presence by doing something that's a little nasty. They'll put you on a plank. So for example, in virtual reality, you'll go up an elevator and you'll come out on the 30th floor, and you won't come out into a hallway, you'll come out onto a piece of wood, a plank that overlooks the city streets. So you're looking 30 floors down, and you know you've got that sense of presence when you get that twinge of adrenaline that makes you feel a little bit of vertigo and a little bit unstable, like you might fall. That's a true sense of presence. Embodiment is acknowledging the existence of your body in the virtual reality. Every VR program is a little bit different. Some will give you a full body, hands, arms, legs, head, so on. Many of them will just give you a head and a torso and hands. Now, one of the reasons they may only give you hands and not arms is because you'd need sensors on the arms, like the elbows, for example, to see your full arm, for your arms to articulate properly. And there's a lot of research in psychology around embodiment. In fact, there's probably more research around embodiment in virtual reality than simulation or anything else, largely because researchers in psychology are interested in how taking on an avatar that looks different from you changes our self-perception, and I'll talk about that in a minute. The other thing is agency, and agency is so important for simulation, and agency is really interesting and exciting to me. So there are programs, virtual reality programs, that have no agency whatsoever. So if you have a VR program where you're traveling through the human colon, Lord knows why you'd want to do that, but, or on a roller coaster, there's no agency for that. You're not doing anything with your hands. Then there are programs with local agency where you're able to pick up things, move things, turn things, push knobs. And then global agency enables you to do things that change the outcome. So if you're doing a patient simulation in virtual reality where you were drawing up a drug, giving the drug, looking at the monitor, if the patient improves as a result of giving the right drug in the right dose, through the right route, at the right time, then you would have global agency. You would see a change in outcome. And that's really important depending on what you're trying to get the student to learn in virtual reality, whether it's just a skill or whether it's critical decision making. So the three areas, as I mentioned, are empathy, online learning, and I'll save simulation for last. So let's talk about empathy first. If you really want to read about empathy in virtual reality, I recommend going to the Virtual Human Interactive Lab at Stanford University. Jeremy Bailenson is the director there, and he's done a lot of research on this subject with with colleagues, and other colleagues have done research on their own looking at empathy in virtual reality. And I'll give you some examples. These aren't all Stanford University things, but in virtual reality, you can take on the avatar or the affect of someone who has Alzheimer's or is on the autism spectrum, where you're hypersensitive to sounds or lights, or you have synesthesia, or you can even take on an avatar who is a different ethnicity from you, and or become a homeless person. And taking on a different avatar changes our self-perception. That's known as the Proteus effect. And it's similar, I guess, analogous to, you know, that saying where people say, if you look good, you feel good. Well, if you look different, you feel different. And so if you become a person of color in virtual reality and you experience cultural aggressions from people, it has a much more profound effect on your perception of cultural bias than, say, having a discussion about it in the classroom. The Stanford created this application called Becoming Homeless, and it's only a 9-minute experience. It's really quite really interesting. So you find yourself sitting in an apartment and you lost your job about a month earlier, 2 months earlier, and you're unable to make the rent and you've got an eviction notice. And the narrator tells you that you need to sell things in your apartment to pay the rent. So you start pointing, clicking at your laptop computer and your flat screen TV and some other things. And in the end, you find you still don't have enough money to pay the rent and you get evicted. Now you find yourself inside your car. And so you look around your car and you can see your belongings in the back seat and then the passenger side, and you've got some food wrappers on the dashboard and you've got some unpaid parking tickets. And then the police pull up with their lights flashing and they impound your car. And they also inform you that the city has a program for homeless people where they can ride the public transit at night for free. So you find yourself now on a city bus, and the narrator tells you that there's a guy on the bus who likes to harass the homeless people. But if you just turn around and stare at him, he'll walk away and he won't try to steal your backpack or harass you anymore. And sure enough, so I'm sitting there and I look up at him, turn to my right, and I look up at him and I stare at him. And after a few seconds, he finally walks away. And the power of feeling like you're the homeless person is really quite remarkable. At the end of that, you could point to other people on the bus and get their backstory. But when I finished that 9-minute experience, it was like having seen a really thought-provoking movie, you know, where you come out of the theater and you're so deeply immersed in your thoughts, trying to process what you just saw, that you really don't want to talk to anyone. That was the kind of experience I had with the app Becoming Homeless. It was quite remarkable. So let's transition now to online learning. I've been going to a lot of events in a program called AltSpace VR. It's a Microsoft product, and there are a lot of events on there. In particular, there's some events by a group called Educators in VR, and they have a Facebook page. So I encourage you, if you want to learn more about virtual reality and education, join Educators in VR on Facebook. And if you can attend the events in 2D on your PC, but if you can get your hands on a headset, I recommend coming into it in virtual reality. The one on the bottom right is another virtual reality platform for learning, and it's called Engage, and it's probably the most robust platform in existence right now for online learning. So in these spaces, you can bring up slides, play videos, you can talk with people. It has 3D audio or spatial audio. So if you're a bunch of people talking together, it gets very noisy. If 2 or 3 of you go off to the corner of a room, it gets very quiet. You don't hear the others speaking. So it's really quite impressive that way. Now I'm going to show you some videos. So this is AltSpace VR, and this is just a kind of an introduction to AltSpace VR, and I'm hoping you're able to hear the audio on this.
Rob, I don't think the audio is coming through on your laptop.
It's coming through on my laptop, but it's not coming through for you?
I'm not hearing it, no.
Okay. How about now?
I'm still not hearing it.
Okay.
Let's see, I'll look into, do you have more videos to play in a second? Oh, I can hear it now.
You can hear it now? Okay, good.
Just very quiet. It's very, very quiet. It's coming through super, super quiet. I'm not sure.
It is, eh? Okay.
There you go.
How's that?
It's on now.
Some other features we have is our personal space bubble. So you'll see that down.
You're going to need your audio to be all the way up.
Yeah, okay. I'll crank it up when I've got a couple more videos. I'm not sure if the audio will come through, but no matter. I just wanted to give people a sense of what the virtual space looks like. So it's animated, but what's remarkable is that you can have these conversations with people, and I've met a lot of brilliant educators in AltSpace and Engage, and connected with them sort of offline as well, and learned things about virtual reality and shared things that I know with them. So it's really been quite powerful. But what's cool is you can have online classes, and the sense of presence is so much better than a Zoom meeting or some other webcasting meeting, that it's much more engaging. Plus, there are no distractions in virtual reality, so you can't go off and check your social media or check other websites. Now, the downside is, because you've got a head-mounted display on, is that you also can't take notes. But on the flip side, you can record these sessions, and students can listen to them again later and take notes at that point. I want to brag a little bit here. So we had some students, second-year students, who did an applied research project where they compared virtual reality to analog patient simulation, and they were the first students in the world to present their research about virtual reality in virtual reality doing AltSpace. So this is Andrea and Lydia over here doing their presentation, and I'll play a little clip of their presentation here. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it, but we'll see.
Basically, what we mean by that is we go into a lab where we simulate a patient's condition or situation. We use mannequins there, so we use actors, usually equipment similar to what we would use on the road, and some practical.
Sorry about that.
You might be able to play it through your computer under the audio tab in your control panel to change it to computer audio rather than the computer microphone. I think it's picking up just the video playing out of your computer into the microphone.
Oh, yeah, it's picking it up through my headset. Sorry, how do I do that?
So there's an audio panel in your control panel under attendees.
Okay, yeah, I see that. Let's have a look here.
Can you change it to computer audio?
I think so. That might change how you hear me. Has that altered the way you hear me, or are we still good?
Hopefully it'll work this way. If not, maybe you'll just have to talk over the important parts of the video.
Okay, but you can hear me?
I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, just let me know what the audio is like when I play this, the rest of this clip here.
So we randomly selected 10 second-year Georgian College paramedic students to participate.
Were you talking there, Nate? Because I have no idea what you said.
It's better like that. If you go to the beginning of the video, you can hear it like that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the content is not important. The point of this was that the students did a presentation in AltSpace VR and virtual reality, which is very cool. So there were about 20 or 30 attendees in the room at that point, but this was part of the first major virtual reality conference. It was called the 2020 Virtual Reality Summit. There were 170 speakers and 6,000 attendees in virtual reality, and the vast majority of people had head-mounted displays on, were attending that way, and then a smaller number were on their PC. So, oops, sorry, let me just go to the next slide here. And so this is an example of an exhibit hall in virtual reality. This is on the platform Engage that I mentioned. It has nothing to do with paramedicine, but I want to show you this because it's really quite remarkable. So this guy's talking about a dump truck, and then he wants to show the dump truck in life size, and you'll get a sense of what that looks like. Here we go.
Hi, Kirsty, is it?
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you. I'm David, and I represent Dacia Heavy Industries. Are you interested in the EN 500 model?
Yeah, I work for a northern mining company. It's exactly the thing we're looking into.
Oh, well, fantastic. I think the EN 500 really is the latest in dump truck tech.
Just going to skip ahead here a little bit so you can see the good part. Okay, here's where he enlarges the dump truck.
Sure, I can show you the exact size. Let me see. Here we go. I'll just bring up my menu. And there we go. This is the exact model. Yeah. Do you want to jump over there and we'll have a look at it?
Yeah.
So, our model's been on the market for a year, and so far we've had great feedback from customers.
Okay, Nate's the audio coming through okay?
Yeah, that one you could hear.
Okay, good. Yeah. So really quite remarkable when you think about it. So HTC, which is one of the largest smartphone companies in the world, because of COVID-19, they moved their developer conference onto Engage, into virtual reality this year, and they had about 3,000 attendees. And that wasn't their exhibit hall, but you can imagine the exhibit halls are very similar, right? So you take digital objects like an ambulance or you know, a jet airplane or a helicopter at an aeromedical conference, and you push it into life size in a virtual exhibition hall. It's really quite remarkable. So I want to finish off talking about simulation before we run out of time, because this is probably the area, one of the areas of most interest to me, particularly given COVID-19 and the fact that we're not able to do skills with one another. So there's this program is called Organon. It's an anatomy program, and it's available on, and just as a side note, I don't have any conflict of interest. I'm not getting money from any of these companies, but Organon has a virtual reality platform, and their program's also available on tablet and PC. And one of our nursing faculty has just submitted a proposal to teach anatomy online in virtual reality, and he's put in a proposal for 40 virtual reality headsets for students to do this. And I'll just show you what this looks like. I don't think we need to hear the music. So you can point at anatomical objects and pull them off, and they just sort of suspend there in midair, and they're dozens of body systems, and you can look at insertions of bones. You can also look at microscopic objects as well. And students can meet in this virtual anatomy lab, which is really quite spectacular. So in a program like this, there's local agency. There's no global agency because there's no higher order thinking, but imagine how much more engaging learning anatomy in virtual reality would be versus, say, a webinar or doing it asynchronously. Really quite something. So I divide virtual reality experiences in terms of sim into two areas: learning discrete skills, where we're using local agency, where we're picking up things and moving things and doing things, and then full out scenarios where you're doing things, or you may not be doing much, you may be just making decisions. So in a discrete skill VR experience, you might, for example, take a pulse oximeter probe from your monitor kit and apply it to the finger, take a blood pressure cuff, apply it to the opposite arm, take the ECG leads, apply it to the chest. In a scenario, you might be able to do those same things, or you might just look at a panel of vital signs and you just click the button for, okay, I want a pulse, I want respiratory rate, I want a blood pressure, I want oximeter. So you're not actually doing the hands-on skill component in a one with global agency. Now you could have both, and the perfect virtual reality experience would be both and would be multiplayer, right? So you two AMTs, two paramedics, one's doing one thing, the other one's doing another. That would be the ideal world. So let me show you some examples of that. So on the left here, top left, is a program by a company called UBSim, and it's a nursing virtual reality experience, and it has a high level of agency, really high level of agency. So you're doing steps in a procedure, and you're learning those steps, and you're able to do those repeatedly if you're doing it on your own. On the right is a surgical application, and this is where the orthopedic surgeon is drilling into the leg to put a rod into the tibia. And the study I've quoted there is a study that was done this year where second-year medical students who really had no orthopedic surgery experience at all were randomized to either virtual reality training for this procedure versus standard training, which was just paper-based and with some lab tools. And what they found was that the percentage of steps done correctly in the VR group was 63% versus 25%, and knowledge retention in the VR group was much higher as well, 50% versus 11%. So what that means to me is if we could get virtual reality applications, and I'll just tell you right now, there aren't many, especially for EMS. If we can get virtual reality applications where students are doing steps in a procedure. So for example, they're assessing Glasgow Coma Scale in a whole bunch of patients, or doing chest auscultation in a whole bunch of different patients, going into different rooms and listening to chest sounds, patients who are presenting with different conditions, or they're drawing up medications and going through their 5, 6, 7 drug writes repeatedly. They're more likely to be able to master those steps in the procedures so that the time spent in the lab is much more valuable. And hypothetically, they could, master those skills to a level where they don't require as much time in the lab. That's what I'm hoping will happen. Now, you lose a bit of the tactile component, but if you learn the steps in the procedure, you develop that embodied cognition, that muscle memory, then that should make the lab time much more valuable. So that's a really interesting area that I'm hoping to see more of. Now here's, this is a company called Arch Virtual, or Catechus. It's same company more or less. And there's quite a bit of agency in this video, so I'll just play it for you. Okay, I'm going to stop that there. So this is a company that prides itself on being receptive to people in the healthcare industry and developing skills that we're looking for. There isn't a lot in the way of EMS skills yet with that company, but I've had conversations with the co-owners of the company and they're quite receptive to that. I'm going to bring up another poll question here since we haven't really done much in the way of polling so far. And we've missed about 4 or 5, so I'm just going to bring up a random poll question here. So let's do this one. So we should have launched this one near the beginning. About 58% of 106 attendees have voted so far. We'll close this in just a second. We got a little over half the votes in, and I think this is probably going to be fairly representative of the larger group. So, but 25% of people have not tried immersive VR yet. Now, you're probably wondering, you know, if I'm interested in trying virtual reality, which sort of headset should I try? And I'll just tell you, without any bias on the matter, I think you should get the Oculus Quest headset. That would be my advice. And you and I can meet in virtual reality and start to discuss the potential of virtual reality. So hide that poll there, and we'll carry on. So this is another example of a virtual reality application that has limited local agency and uses mostly drop-down lists. So it's single player and it's great for higher order thinking. So when you want to ask the patient questions, you choose from a drop-down list. When you want to do vital signs, you choose from a drop-down list. When you want to give meds, you just choose from a drop-down list, and so on. So this sort of thing is really ideal for you know, students who are coming into the EMTP program and have lots of experience, or second year or third year, as would be the case in Canada. And so it doesn't give you a lot in terms of sort of beginner level, and so it lacks agency in that situation. And I'm really hoping the companies are going to come around and develop virtual reality programs with a greater amount of agency. This is, in contrast, this is also one that it teaches higher order thinking, but there's no agency whatsoever. So this is a program by Health Scholars, and it's a single player medical simulation, and it uses voice recognition and artificial intelligence. So you can see a student in the left-hand corner there who's wearing a headset, and she just basically speaks to all the animated characters and gives them orders. So let me just play a quick video of this.
Does it require expensive equipment, people resources, a time-consuming setup? Enter virtual reality. Holodeck's new ACLS virtual reality simulation training virtualizes stable, unstable, and cardiac arrest scenarios, effectively recreating stress in a negative.
Mr. Nelson is a 56-year-old man who's here for a pickup.
The learner takes on the role of team lead, identifying different cardiac waveforms and using state-of-the-art voice recognition technology to direct virtual team members.
Andre, start chest compression. Starting compression.
To shock, perform CPR.
Phyllis, let's go ahead and shock the patient.
Charging.
So I'll just stop that there. I don't think you need to see anymore, but really interesting concept. And they actually have an EMS ACLS scenario and or series of scenarios, and pediatric events life support as well. So the company has they are migrating their software to the Oculus Quest, which is a standalone headset. So that's going to be a lot less expensive, a lot more user friendly. So they've done that, and what's also interesting about this is I met a physician from Columbia, Missouri by the name of Tim Cobalt, and he's an emerge doc who teaches the emergency residents, and he's doing a randomized control trial where he's randomized his residents to ACLS training with mannequins versus ACLS training with mannequins supplemented by virtual reality. And the study isn't finished yet, but he sort of secretly told me that the students who practice ACLS and PALS in virtual reality are much more proficient. So really interesting. I think that's the secret sauce in virtual reality is you get to practice things a lot on your own, and there's no audience, and there's a lot less pressure that way, and it's somewhat anonymous, and then you're better prepared for the real world practice, if you will. So let me just move on to the next set of slides. This other one is really interesting. This is programmed by PCS Spark, and the resources, by the way, are in my handout. And this is a communication skill virtual reality software where you go into a hospital room and there's a patient there and you can see her chart, and it uses voice recognition and artificial intelligence, and you can have a conversation with her. So I can come in and say, "Hi, Valerie, my name is Rob. I'm a paramedic student. I understand you have a headache." And she'll say, "Oh yeah, it's really bad." And I'll ask, "When did your headache start?" She'll say, "It started about 4 weeks ago." "And is it worse today?" "I woke up with it about 2 hours ago. It's quite a bit worse." "And on a scale of 0 to 10, how bad is the pain?" "Oh, it's pretty bad, about a 7. So, and you can ask her medical history, her meds, her allergies, what she's taken for the headache, do an entire OPQRST on the head pain, and it records everything that you said, so your transcript and her transcript, and then gives you feedback. And it'll say you forgot to ask about allergies, or if you forgot to ask whether the pain was constant or comes and goes, or you forgot to ask about radiation of pain. So really powerful, right? To think that students could practice taking a history with multiple scenarios on their own, really quite incredible technology. So I'm going to wrap up here with my thoughts about the future of XR or virtual reality in EMS. First and foremost, I think it's going to become a major part of EMS training going forward because it's experiential. You actually get to experience things in virtual reality that you get with no other medium, no other technology, which is really quite incredible. Like any educational technology, always important to think about pedagogy before technology, and what value does it bring? You know, is it addressing a key pain point? Is it addressing something that's dangerous or expensive or otherwise impossible to do in analog format? And it requires a high sense of presence, embodiment, and agency. Depends on what you're trying to achieve, right? So if you want your students to learn skills, local agency is really important. And voice and physical interaction, artificial intelligence is going to be really important moving forward. There are some crude haptics in, let me go back here, some haptics in virtual reality, meaning that with your controller, and your controller looks like a hand in virtual reality. If you reach down to feel a radial pulse, you can actually feel the controller vibrate. So it's not quite like a pulse, but you have some basic haptics. Haptics are going to advance. We're going to have haptic gloves. You're going to be able to feel things more. There's going to be more of a tactile experience. Headsets now have, and programs have analytics to give feedback to students, and we have biometrics. So they're inward-facing cameras that can track your eye movement to quantify your situational awareness as an EMT or paramedic, that check your pupillary size. Eventually, they'll have galvanic skin sensors. They'll be able to determine your mood, and that might be really important, for example, for stress inoculation training before we put our student into a mass casualty incident in virtual reality. And finally, I just want to say that it's really important for us, not all of us, but some of you hopefully will join me in exploring virtual reality and trying to figure out what the best fit is for EMS training, and engage the vendors to talk about what our pain points are and what our thresholds are in terms of cost, so that, you know, it's important for all of us to be on the same page so we can get some reasonably priced virtual reality experiences. So that's all I have to say about VR. Thank you so much for your patience. Apologies for some of the glitches. I'm gonna give one more poll here before we bail. Let's see here. So after all of this conversation, let me ask you this question. Maybe about half of people voted so far. We still have 99 participants. That's not bad. We had 106 15 minutes ago, so people are hanging in there. I appreciate that. All right, I'm going to close the poll right now because we're at about 70% of the vote. Let me just bring that up and share that. And I'm really impressed to see that about 85% of you are actually seriously considering virtual reality. So that's fantastic. In all seriousness, the Oculus Quest headset is probably the best standalone headset on the market right now. It's the one I recommend. Next year it could be something completely different, but the Oculus Quest is quite good. And if you end up buying a headset or you already have one, feel free to reach out to me. You'll be able to get my contact information from the handout, and let's explore virtual reality together. Let me just tuck this away, and there we go.
Rob, did you want to take a couple questions real quick at the end, or did you want to just?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, my apologies for running right to the very last minute.
Totally fine. We actually did have a fair amount of questions rolling right at the end there. Did you go through them, or do you want me to just tell you the ones I kind of looked through?
Yeah, I don't see them, so if you wouldn't mind letting me know.
Yeah, so there was one question that was about basically the startup cost, and do you know of any grants that are available for upstart programs?
Yeah, so bear in mind that I'm from Canada and most of you are from the United States. So the short answer is yes, there are all sorts of grants, but they'll be local. So you'll need to find out what they are in your county or state. I suspect, so the boss who I report to right now under the COVID-19 situation, it's his opinion that there's going to be some tremendous hits to education, but the one area that's probably going to get funded is things like virtual and augmented reality, because it's new, it's innovative, and it has the potential to solve some problems, some barriers that we've run into as a result of COVID-19. So I suspect they're going to be grants for the same reason.
All right, great, thanks. And then this one's a little bit longer, but do you believe that this technology could eliminate the need for the current hunter-gatherer approach for practicum skills sign-off and annual recertification processes by replacing them with case management evaluations?
Well, that's a good question. I could get in trouble for the way I answer that. So I think my short answer is no, not entirely. I think what virtual reality will supplement the hunter-gatherer approach. What it'll also do, though, is it'll address some of the low-frequency, high-risk skills and enable students to be able to practice them more, so they get the best value of their lab experience, their clinical experience, or their field experience in a way they wouldn't be able to get in the lab. So I think that's going to be important. We're certainly seeing that in surgery, and there's a lot of money invested into virtual reality for surgery.
Awesome. And then this one, are you familiar with / how does this compare with programs like HeartCode, ACLS, and PALS?
So the virtual reality ACLS and PALS application that I described earlier meets AHA guidelines. So that's first and foremost. Any program would have to, right? And it really, it doesn't give you the hands-on skill that you would have as a team member, but gives you that team leader experience. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
All right. I don't honestly know if it does or not, but we'll move on to the next question.
Yep.
Let's see. How does this relate to? I'm sorry. How does this correlate to research about gamers acquiring surgical skills more quickly? Are you familiar with this? I guess if you don't know about it.
Yeah. So the short answer is the research that does exist, and there's a bit of a paucity of research, given that immersive virtual reality really only came into existence in 2016. And I've got a link, by the way, to a literature search that I've been doing ongoing for the last couple of years, so you can go through that. But the short answer is yes, students can learn skills in virtual reality and perfect the skills and memorize all the steps in a way that's in some ways inconceivable in a lab. you know, that you might not get that kind of repetitive hands-on practice in the lab. So, you know, my hope is that eventually we'll see virtual reality in the hands of students that will be able to take it home. I wanted to just add before I forget, because I promised I'd say this, I was going to talk about the metaverse. So the metaverse is really, so I talked about online learning and virtual reality on those platforms, and then learning skills or scenarios. The metaverse would be a situation where you go into a social VR platform and you'd be able to do those skills and scenarios in VR. So what I kind of envision is we go into a virtual city, and I hop in the back of the ambulance with my students. We drive to calls. They go into a house or apartment. They do calls, and I just stand on the side and act as the mentor, as the rumble strip. That's the metaverse. That's the world we're shooting for in the next 5 years or so.
Awesome. So there was one question. Can we get the contact information for you, Rob? It will be in the email that goes out. It'll have his social media again and email address. So it'll be sent to everybody that's in this lobby. Everyone that attended will get the follow-up email with the recording and with how you can contact Rob.
Yep,
there's
great.
A question that's about how many gigabytes would you recommend, 32 or 64? I don't know if that's in relation to the headsets or
Yeah.
talking about how these things are stored.
So the Oculus Quest comes in to either 64 gig or 128 gig. 64 gig is probably more than enough. Most applications range between 200 and 500 megabytes, and the rest is just streamed via Wi-Fi. So 64 gigs is adequate.
Great. And just to clarify, we had a question. Oculus is OCULUS.
OCULUS, correct.
Let's see. Do you know when the Quest will be available? Is the Quest currently available, the Oculus Quest?
Yeah, that's a good question. You have to do a search for that. Here in Canada, it's available through Best Buy online. It's not available at the Oculus site or through Amazon, but hopefully it will become available again shortly. But Best Buy is where I got one recently.
All right, great. Let's see. And can VR be recorded? So I guess to play back like a video version that's recorded in virtual reality.
Yeah. So it all depends on the program you're using. With some standalone apps, the answer is no. With some, yes. So on the platform Engage, you can actually do what they call volumetric video, which means that it's a 3D video. So not only can you record it, but you can go back and see it with your headset on and see it from a 3D perspective. So it just depends on the program.
All right, great. It looks like that's mostly all of the questions. I'm seeing people are informing us they were able to find it on Amazon, but it's $600 a unit, so that might be a little bit cost prohibitive. But
yeah, it's probably being sold by a third party, because in the US it should be under $600 for the 128 gig. But if they're talking Canadian, then that's about right.
yeah, it looks like everybody will have to try to find it from a different place.
Yeah.
But, I think that pretty much wraps up everything. Unless you have
Okay.
anything else that you wanted to talk about, we're pretty much out of questions.
No, just want to thank everyone for attending, and again, apologies for some minor technical glitches along the way. But my contact information and lots of other information is available in that handout. And if you want to reach out to me, I'll try to get back to people as quickly as possible. And we can set up a web conference to chat if you want to, delve a little deeper into VR.
Awesome. Thank you, Rob. I really appreciate it. And for everyone that's still on the call, this recording will be sent out immediately as soon as this concludes. And you can always find all of our archived webinars on our YouTube page, on our NAEMSE.org, and we have coming up in the next few weeks, we're trying to do at least 2 webinars a week if we're able to get them scheduled out. Everything, obviously, people's schedules are pretty busy right now, but we have a lot of webinars coming up. We're going to keep trying to schedule as many as we can. So keep watching our social media and keep looking out for emails if you're a member so that you guys can stay up to date on all of our webinars. We have a lot of them coming up. But thank you, Rob. I really appreciate you taking the time to give us this presentation. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.
Pleasure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, and thank you guys. So be safe out there. Have a good day.